Coming up, I'll outline the wide implications of Israel's decimation of the top Hezbollah leadership. I'll make the case that Netanyahu has confounded his critics and emerged as a, well, not just national, but international hero. Siaka Massaquoi, who plays a key role in the reenactments in Vindicating Trump, joins me. We're going to talk about his role in the film, but also his active involvement in conservative causes. And I'll conclude my discussion of Booker T. Washington's Up From Slavery. Hey, if you're watching on YouTube or Rumble, listening on Apple, Google, or Spotify, please subscribe to my channel. This is the Dinesh D'Souza podcast.
America needs this voice. The times are crazy. In a time of confusion, division, and lies, we need a brave voice of reason, understanding, and truth. This is the Dinesh D'Souza podcast.
Guys, Vindicating Trump is still in theaters, and it's in theaters this week. Now, unfortunately, we will lose some theaters next weekend. We had 840 or so theaters this past weekend, and we will hold those theaters through Thursday, but we might be down to a few hundred theaters, maybe 300, 400 by next weekend. So the movie will have a smaller reach next weekend. If you can see it this week, please do. Go to the theater, go during the week, and you'll be glad you did. It's a powerful movie. Rotten Tomatoes, which is basically where the audience, people who have seen the movie, weigh in and give it a score, it's 97% with hundreds of reviews. So it's a really good film. People really like it, and you will really like it, and you will find it to be emotionally powerful and also, in a way, intellectually original. Now, I want to talk about Israel in this opening segment and the next one as well, because what's happened in Israel or done by Israel, I think, is very significant. Maybe the most significant thing since the Abraham Accords, and it is something that throws the whole Netanyahu reputation and legacy into a whole new light. You probably know that Netanyahu has been a very controversial figure in Israel, and there are a lot of people who don't like Netanyahu. In some ways, his reputation resembles Trump in the United States. And yet, here, for example, is on social media. I'll be honest, I never liked Netanyahu, but he has redeemed himself in a way I never thought possible. His actions are, quote, downright legendary. And what are these actions? Well, quite simply, the decimation of Sheikh Nasrallah. This is the guy who was he's the head of the group called Hezbollah, the terrorist group called Hezbollah. He's been that since the early he became its leader in 1992. And in a kind of a brilliant military maneuver, Israel has wiped out the Hezbollah leadership. Now, just for clarity, Hamas is the Sunni group that is governing in Gaza. Hezbollah is a Shia group that is an extension of Iran. Iran sort of set up Hezbollah almost to conduct its international terrorist operations. Hezbollah, by the way, is not just active in the Middle East. It's active in Argentina. It's active in South America. It's active in Venezuela, in Mexico too, I believe. It is, and in the United States. Now, almost nobody thought that it was possible to do this kind of a strike. We sort of had a prelude to it with Israel doing these ingenious operations with pagers and with cell phones and with walkie-talkies. In other words, zapping the communication system of these terrorists. But being able to take out this guy, Sheikh Nasrallah, is of a whole different dimension altogether. Now, in some ways, it is worrisome because it could push Iran closer to the brink of war with Israel. And that would, of course, be a huge event, and it would have reverberations that would go beyond the Middle East. But you also have got to realize when we think about this stuff, it's not simply a matter of how do we do the thing that is least aimed at aggravating our adversary, but rather how do we do the thing that effectively achieves the objective of putting the enemy on the defensive, maybe even causing the enemy to retreat, and maybe even causing them to quit their nefarious schemes. Trump likes to say something about Iran, that these are people who never win a war, but they never lose a negotiation. They are like the world's most brilliant negotiators. Now, I don't think that that's strictly speaking true, because in other words, I think the way Trump's looking at it is, how did the Iranians convince Obama to give them such a good deal? Well, the answer, of course, and Debbie's chuckling a little from the sidelines, is Obama basically wants to undermine the United States. He likes to strengthen the enemies of the United States. So it's not really a hard sell in convincing Obama to let the Iranians have, bucketfuls of cash and all the stuff that he gave them. I am sort of amused by both the Iranians as well as the Hezbollah. Well, the Hezbollah has no leadership now. Their leadership is hiding in tunnels. And I'm quite sure that the next in line aren't too excited to be taking up that job, right? In other words, this is sort of like the heads of the 5 mafia families have all been wiped out. And it's like, hey, would you like to be the head of the Gambino family? Oh, no, not exactly. I'm not applying for that job. So I think we're going to see some of this. But with their normal bravado, the Iranians and even some Hezbollah so-called spokesmen are saying, well, this crosses the line. This is going too far. This is crossing the red line. Well, of course, I think that is a statement not made in strength, but made in weakness. Because ultimately, the Israelis have shown, you know what? We can do this. We have the ability. We have the ingenuity to do it. And it eliminates a very serious threat that has been, in a way, aimed at Israel and haunting Israel, but it's also a threat that is aimed at the United States. Some people think, why are we getting involved? It's not our fight. It's Israel's fight. The United States is not really involved. When we come back, I'll tell you how the United States is involved and how Hezbollah has been targeting the United States and has targeted the United States and has killed a lot of Americans going all the way back to the Reagan years. FDNY firefighter Daniel Foley assisted in rescue and recovery efforts at Ground Zero, but Daniel couldn't have known then that his heroism would cost him his life more than 18 years later. His death, like so many others, resulted from 9/11 related illnesses caused by the toxic dust that formed when the Twin Towers collapsed. Victims and first responders are still suffering and dying from 9/11, and yet children in this nation are growing up unaware of America's darkest day. The Tunnel to Towers 9/11 Institute is helping educators teach children about 9/11. Tunnel to Towers 9/11 curriculum units have scripted lessons, background for teachers, and activities for students. They're based on first-person accounts and designed to meet many academic standards. The 9/11 Institute offers the Discovering Heroes book series, a speakers bureau, a mobile exhibit with 9/11 artifacts, and memorial scholarships for the children of the Foundation's program recipients. Help our nation keep its promise to never forget. Donate $11 a month to Tunnel to Towers at T2T.org. That's T, the number 2, T.org. With the massive tax hikes proposed by Kamala Harris, an almost 40% top income tax rate, 7% increase to the corporate tax, a capital gains tax on unrealized gains, all these proposals put together could add almost $2 trillion to a current $2 trillion deficit. You may be thinking it's time to make more of your savings both tax-sheltered and inflation-sheltered. Well, there's a way to do that. This is where the people at Birch Gold Group can help you. Birch Gold will assist you in converting an existing IRA or 401k into an IRA in gold. The best news, you don't pay a penny out of pocket. Just text the word Dinesh to 989898. You'll get a free information kit on gold. No obligation, just information about how you can fortify your savings before the crazy really hits. Birch Gold has an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. Thousands of happy customers like me and Debbie. You should trust and contact Birch Gold too. Text Dinesh to the number 989898 for your free information kit today. I mentioned in the last segment that Iran set up the group called Hezbollah in in the early 80s to be the kind of export arm of the Iranian revolution. And Hezbollah got right to work. In 1982, there was a massive bombing of the U.S. military center in Beirut, and 220 Marines were killed. Who did that? Hezbollah did that. And the Lebanese have seen their country completely destroyed by Hezbollah. It's hard to remember now, but Beirut, going back to the late 40s and 50s, was considered one of the cosmopolitan cities of the world. It was considered a place that was commercial, with a long history, an interesting place to go, really good food. Tourists would go to Beirut, but no tourist has really, or no group of tourists has really set foot in Beirut for a long time. Why? It's become a den of terrorism. So the destruction of Hezbollah is also simultaneously the liberation of Lebanon. By the way, in the recent Israeli strike, one of the guys killed, Ibrahim Akil. Apparently, he's the leader of Hezbollah's Islamic Jihad group, which masterminded the 1983 killing of those Marines. In 1994, Hezbollah expanded its activities into the Western Hemisphere, and they bombed the Jewish center in Buenos Aires on orders from Tehran. The bombing killed 80 people. Apparently, it was the largest terrorist attack in the history of Argentina. In fact, this is something that Javier Milei now talks about. So with Hezbollah, Hezbollah is not the same as Hamas. Hamas is essentially local. Hezbollah is international. Hezbollah is based in Lebanon, but Hezbollah is very much part of the broader Iranian philosophy of fighting both the little Satan, which is Israel, and the great Satan, which is the United States. So you can see in the enemies that the cause of Israel and the United States is in fact connected. I mean, one can reasonably dispute, are we giving too much aid to Israel, or what should U.S. policy be? But the point I want to make is that we should not assume that when there are engagements abroad, let's say, for example, Iraq, Afghanistan, Ukraine, Israel, that these are all the same thing, and that either the United States gets in or it gets out, either it stays in or it stays out. Because even when you're talking about U.S. involvement, there are different types of involvement. Obviously, at one extreme, you have the deployment of U.S. troops, as happened in Afghanistan and Iraq. But at the other side, you have basically diplomatic involvement, or you have the fact that the Israelis do the fighting, but the United States provides some military aid to enable the Israelis to do the fighting more effectively, fighting that actually is in the U.S. national interest. Israel has been living for 40 years with a very powerful force, Hezbollah, pointing literally tens of thousands of rockets at Israel. And this has put Iran in the driver's seat in commandeering what happens in the Middle East. It's kind of like, Israel, guess what? We've got all these rockets pointed at you, and if you act aggressive, we will teach you a lesson. And what the Israelis have really done is they have essentially, well, they haven't been able to disarm all the rockets, but they have built a pretty good dome to intercept them. And what they have said is, all right, we're not willing to live and accept these terms of terror that you're giving us. We're going to use our creativity, our ingenuity, and the Israelis are at the forefront in the world in high tech. So in a way, I'm not surprised that they're able to pull this off, but I am surprised. I am surprised because governments operate bureaucratically. I think I've said before in the podcast that I thought that Israel in its Gaza operation was moving too slow. And what I mean by moving too slow is this: when you have a global outrage like the October 7 attacks, you have the sympathies of the world with you. But those sympathies are not going to be with you forever. Sympathy is an emotion, and it has a kind of a expiration date, which is to say, not that it goes away, but it begins to be more distant. Even when we think back to an event as epical as 9/11, we don't feel the same raw emotion that we did right after the event. In fact, just a year or two after the event, it didn't have quite that same fire that it did right on 9/11. And so that was my point, is that in conducting retaliatory operations, the sooner the better. And Israel has dragged it out, so I could kind of see why people were getting impatient with Netanyahu. But now this guy has redeemed himself. I used the thumbnail Debbie and I did of David versus Goliath because in some ways the combination of all these Muslim powers that in the past anyway have been deadly enemies of Israel. Today, Israel has been able to make some treaties and some rapprochements and some modus vivendi, which is a way of getting along with some of these Arab countries, and that's all to the good. That's a trend that Trump has advanced, and that's a trend that we'd like to see continue in a second Trump administration. But for now, I think we can sort of bask as friends of Israel in an operation magnificently executed. And Netanyahu, who was in a way looking in bad shape politically and has been now for many months, is now, I think, bathed in a certain kind of glory and rightly deserved. I got a really good deal for you from Balance of Nature, so hold off on ordering until you hear what I have to say. If you go to balanceofnature.com to buy this is their popular fruit and veggies in a capsule, fruit and veggie supplements, a discount offer will pop up. It may say 20 or 25% off your first order, but don't click that. Why? Because if you use my promo code, you'll get 35% off your first order, plus free shipping. My special code is simply the word America. Use the code and save big. Here's another bonus. Balance of Nature has a risk-free money-back guarantee, so go ahead, find out for yourself what I already know. There's no other product out there like Balance of Nature when it comes to fruit and veggie supplements. Whether you order online or call them direct, you got to use promo code America to get the special offer, 35% off and free shipping. Here's the number to call, 800-246-8751. Again, it's 800-246-8751, or go to balanceofnature.com. When you use discount code America, you get 35% off and free shipping. Are you feeling overwhelmed by the increasing cost of health insurance? Have you had enough of not having control over your healthcare dollars? Introducing Share Right. It's healthcare done the right way. At Share Right, you're not just a number, you're part of a caring community. And forget about paying excessive premiums. With Share Right, you stand to save 30 to 50% compared to health insurance. So think about what you could do with all those savings. But it's more than just savings. Share Right ensures you have access to the care you deserve precisely when you need it, from routine checkups to unexpected emergencies. With Share Right, your healthcare is their top priority. Empower yourself today. Take control of your healthcare costs. Visit shareright.org/Dinesh. You'll learn more. See how much you can save. Visit shareright.org/Dinesh. That's shareright.org/Dinesh for healthcare done the right way. Guys, I'm delighted to welcome to the podcast a new guest. His name is Siaka Massaquoi. He's a Hollywood actor. In fact, he's been acting for over a decade. But he's also a conservative activist. He's the vice chair of the LA GOP. He was interestingly raided by the FBI for being in D.C. on January 6th. And he's been featured on PragerU, One America News, American Fate Network, Newsmax, the Babylon Bee podcast. Of course, the highlight of his very distinguished life, he was in the recreations for the new movie Vindicating Trump, and we'll start by talking a little about that. Siaka, welcome. Thanks for joining me. By the way, you can follow him on X at Siaka, Massaquoi. Siaka, welcome.
Yes,
thanks for joining me. I got to say, Debbie's right here, and also our producer Brian, and both of them are weighing in to say that you stole the show in Vindicating Trump. You were downright hilarious, particularly the interactions between you and the kind of female boss in the Democratic National Committee apparatus. Talk a little bit about your role in the film and how you pulled it off.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me, Dinesh. Thank you for having me in the movie. That was just an amazing experience. I thought casting was great because the actor and myself, we worked really well together. Doing something like that, the character I played was kind of a microcosm of my own journey from going from being far on the left when I was in high school, college, and my first probably 10 years in LA to I got sober in 2016, literally March 15th, 2016, and watching kind of how the media was doing things about Trump and how they were talking about him, but also how he moved. He came up with on the debate stage. I remember he said on that first major debate, which is like a highlight for anyone who wants to watch debates, and he said about the healthcare issue. He goes, "You know what will solve it? You put it on the open market and you let the market decide." And I was like, "Uh-oh, they're going to try to kill this guy because he's talking about real solutions." And from that moment on, I then started checking him out, leaning more and more, voted for him in 2016, and started watching other people around me in Hollywood and how they would react while getting more money in their pocket, no wars, being safer. I'm like, these people are losing their mind. Like, what's going on? At the same time, it correlated with my sobriety, with my movement towards God, getting closer to God, seeing that this world that I just at this point was almost 15 years in, seeing that it was just so full of lies and delusion. On this side was his truth, whether we liked it or not, had nothing to do with it. And in my journey into sobriety was, the truth may hurt, but it helps, right? It's what heals. So I tried to bring that journey into this character where he always had and added just a little bit of sarcasm with like, oh yeah, a little pokiness to him, so it didn't come off as too much like you're crazy, I'm smart, more like, are you sure 2 + 2 is 3? Like, let's go back to the math a little bit on that. So it was very fun to be able to bring a little bit of my journey into this character. And I think the journey that a lot of people who are, maybe in the middle, maybe just are are turned off of what's going on the left. And so one thing I think that we can all agree on in this section is that what this movie does is like we bring in some of that joy. That's what I always want to do in all my work I do, especially now being more conservative actor, is I want to bring in that fun. I want to bring in laughter so, we can release the pressure that everything has, we've been on for the last 8 years. We weren't allowed to enjoy his presidency for 4 years. And then now we weren't even allowed to champion his rise back into power, which I believe he's going to get.
Siaka, it's you raise a bunch of very interesting points, and I think one of them is that in this film we have more chuckles and at times even laugh out loud moments than in any of the recent movies that I can remember. It may be that our last film, Police State, was obviously a theme that doesn't lend itself to sort of, knee-slapping type of laughter, of course. But ridicule is a powerful weapon. And and what we're doing in these recreations is we're showing the media, but in a way that gets people to laugh at them. And we're showing the kind of Trump derangement syndrome. I mean, when you're interacting with your boss, that's what she has, right? She is just deranged over Trump. And anything that you say, even if it's like, hey, people do like billionaires. I'm just thinking of a number of your kind of telling lines, and she just cannot digest those ideas, and so she just reacts emotionally to them. I mean, I got to say, she did a great job as well.
Yeah, she was amazing. But to your point about ridicule, it's what the Bible even calls us to ridicule the foolish. But at the same time, I watched when I was on the other side, where I saw it start from the left was The Daily Show. The Daily Show and Jon Stewart made it okay to ridicule conservatives and Republicans, because that would be my response. When any Republican would come up and say anything, they're already a clown to you, so that you can't take anything they say seriously. But it more than just making fun of the one side, it emboldened the left to then move in such ways that you can when you don't see your opponent or your person on the opposite side as at your level. And I think a lot of times conservatives, we're on our heels a lot, trying to defend as opposed to standing tall, chest up, head up, not in our own pride, but in the pride of the Lord, so that we know our positions are correct. We know it's right, but then we're so worried because we don't want somebody to react a certain way. Well, let's see that what they are and what they've been doing is so ridiculous. we can laugh again, release that pressure that we have on, and then get back to what is actually true and what we know is true, and then be able to stand right in front of it and go, yeah, no, that's a man in a dress. That's not a woman. I don't care how many times you tell me that is a man in a dress, and I can laugh at it initially, like Vera DeMilo from Jim Carrey's character from back in Living Color. We can have that fun again, because I think that will help us not be so tight in this fight, and you be loose. I used to do training for MMA and all that. When you're tight, when you're trying to fight like this, you're going to lose every time. You know, I played football in college. You have to be relaxed. You have to be at ease and move with that grace. There's a reason why it's called grace to me. It's like, so you can just have that fluidity. And once we are able in a movie like this, and hoping more projects from like the Babylon Bee, working with Daily Wire, that we will go into the land of humor a little more, so we can ridicule bad ideas. That's why the fool has been so important throughout all kingdoms, because they say the fool was who kept the king in check, right? So if we can get in there, the fool meaning a gesture for some people, if we can get in there and start bringing in this humor and start being able to laugh at the level of ridiculousness that the oligarchs, if you will, are taking us, I think that as a people, we're going to be so much further along, and won't just accept everything because we're afraid of a name call, or we're afraid of losing our job, or we're afraid of our neighbors looking at us funny. No, we need to call out what is crazy as crazy. And this movie does it in a way where it's just not, you're crazy, shut up. It's ha ha ha. Come on, guys. Don't you see this is a little ridiculous? Let's laugh. And then let's talk about the real issues we face, gas prices, inflation, harm towards children, the border being open. We can talk about it honestly. Once people can relax and bring that temperature down, I believe humor is the best track for that.
That's a really good point. Siaka, talk about your experience in January 6th. I've had a bunch of different January 6th defendants on the podcast at various times. And I must say my capacity for sort of outrage is always expanded when I hear one more account, because the level of injustice here is of a staggering scale. And yet for the left, it's almost like they feel like not enough has been done to go after January 6th defendants. Talk about your experience, what you did, what you saw. Why did the FBI come banging on your door?
Well, like many people, I went to January 6th to support President Trump, and also just to hang out. This was my third time there in D.C. in about 4 months. I went to Candace's Blexit event before that, and I went one other time in October. And this time around, it was the same feeling, except it was super cold. I actually didn't go to the Capitol right after the speech. I went home. I went to the hotel first, the Marriott that's right there by Freedom Square. After I turned on the TV, saw MSNBC kind of giving their MSNBC take on everything Trump. And I was like, they're lying. I'm going to find that reporter and then be that crazy guy behind her, right? So as I start walking down, people are kind of meandering back, and I'm asking, oh, is it over? Everyone leave? Like, no, people are still hanging out. And mind you, this was the same type of feeling I got the first two times, where it felt like a big American festival. People just walking around, great environment. Then I get closer to the Capitol itself, and the crowd's huge, and I'm just pretty shocked. Some lady actually recognized me and MAGA Hulk from the Beverly Hills rallies. We did a quick interview that was interrupted by the Star Spangled Banner, so we started singing the national anthem. As I started walking up more and more, you start to see cops being aggressive towards Trump supporters. I'm like, okay, so I walk around away from that issue, because I'm just thinking that's the issue over there. I start to get closer to the building, and I get closer to, I want to say it was the west side. And I get to a doorway, and in the doorway, we start kind of shuffling in like you're going into a football or a concert. As we're shuffling, we kind of get stopped right into the doorway. So we couldn't really go any further because there were cops standing there. I asked one cop, like, hey, I heard Nancy Pelosi, somebody got on her desk. And he's like, I don't know. I was like, okay. And I turned, and I'm holding my phone, and there's video out. I put it on my X if anyone wants to check it out. And I'm just like, look what's going on. I'm just trying to get everything I can with my phone. Because to me, I thought that was one of the biggest reasons people were there, was to make sure they captured the truth on their own, from their own devices, because we know what the media will do. There were cops just standing against the wall. One guy, as I'm standing there, he comes up, a police officer, full garb. He said, I need you guys to go back the other way right now. I'm like, all right, okay, we're going to do it. You see, we're being peaceful and reasonable. I turn around, I'd say the people who were standing behind me, I say, hey guys, go back the other way. We walked out. I spent approximately 71 seconds in that doorway, walked out, recorded some more, even talked to some other cops on the side, and then I went back to the hotel. Then came June 10th, the morning of pre-dawn raid. There's banging on the door. My best friend, who was living with me at the time with his sons 3 and 6, he gets grabbed, thrown against the wall of our front door, guns pointed to him. His boys are looking out the window watching this happen to their father. I had 2 other roommates, a couple in another room. My room was further down the hallway. So as I started hearing FBI, FBI. I was still sleeping, so it felt like it was a dream. And then it started getting more conscious, and I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I mean, part of the reason why I was so loud and so in the face of Instagram about what I was doing was because I didn't want anything to be misconstrued. I wasn't breaking anything. I wasn't, tussling with cops. It's like, look, I was there. It was peaceful from what I saw and what I experienced. There should be no reason why in a reasonable society the FBI should come after me, right? But there they were. And when I opened the door, there were 2 officers, and they turned and point their guns right at me, flashing in my eyes, saying, FBI, put your hands up. Put my hands up, and all I could say at the time, because my dog sleeps in a room with me, I was like, please don't shoot my dog. And then they kept saying, friendly dog, friendly dog. They grabbed me. They put me outside, the lead agent. I'm asking them, what is this about? What is this about? And they're like, it's about January 6th. I was like, well, let me see a warrant. They go, well, we'll let you know once we clear the house. I was like, I got to call my lawyer. He goes, it's not an arrest. This is not what this is. So you don't need a lawyer right now. Puts me against the wall, and I'm waiting. The only other person at this point that I saw was my 3-year-old godson being held by an agent put in the car. So at this point, cars are all out front of my place. The embarrassment is what it is. They put me back in. They're searching all my stuff. They end up taking my computer, my laptop, or my cell phones, my MAGA hats, my flash drives. They take all this stuff, saying that they're not here to arrest me. They're not here to charge me. They're just here for a search warrant. That's all they were doing. They leave. It started the raid started, I want to say before 6, ended about noon. And we got on Instagram right away. We told our story right away because I know what the media does. I've been in media at this point in Hollywood for so long. I know that if you don't tell your story, they're going to tell your story. And there was no way I was going to let that happen. So I started speaking right away. I know a lot of other people that I knew who got raided. They kept their mouth shut. I'm like, nope, If I'm going to go down for this, people are going to hear what I have to say. So after that raid, for almost 3 years, nothing. Except for harassment. For every time I flew, I get checked at the front gate. Then I get checked at the security section. Then I also got searched at the gate itself before I get into the plane. Now, if I had to do a connecting flight, on that connecting flight, they checked me again. So sometimes I'd get checked 3 times, pat down before I even got to my destination. This was going on for almost 3 years. And on November 30th, coming back from the Lady Ballers premiere here in Tennessee with Daily Wire, my wife's 7 months pregnant. We land. As soon as I touch my foot on that tarmac, is at Burbank Airport, so a smaller airport. I touch my foot on the tarmac. This female agent walks up in front of me, separating me from my wife, saying, Siaka Massaquoi, you need to come with us, FBI. 2 agents jump on my shoulder to grab me. 4th is standing there saying, just come with us. They separate me. I ask, well, what am I being arrested for? They go, you know. I go, no, you tell me. What am I being arrested for? He goes, we don't want to talk about it. I go, no. You're not going to take me away unless you tell me what I'm being arrested for. Finally, one agent who's standing on my left, who's the most aggressive one, kind of shaking. He goes, it's for January 6th. And I'm like, I didn't do anything on January 6th. The guy on the right goes, stop talking about it. I go, he brought it up. So I always try to find some humor no matter what situation I'm in. And so they took me away, and they drove me to Monterey Park Jail that night. The entire time I'm telling them, look, you guys could have called me. I would have came in. At the time, I was suing them for violating my First, Third, Fourth Amendment right at the time. So it wasn't like they didn't know who I was. I ran for office in 2022, the state assembly. You knew where I lived. I was vice chair of the LA GOP. I'm here. My wife's pregnant. I'm not going anywhere. I kept saying, you guys could have just called me. And then the agent actually admitted, he said, well, we didn't want you to be prepared. That's what he did. When we got to the jail, he finally sat down and he goes, I'll show you, here's your charges. And he showed me that I was charged for all this effort, from the raid to 2.5, 3 years of this harassment to that moment. He showed me, and it came down to 4 misdemeanors. 4 misdemeanors include trespassing on a restricted, trespassing in a capital, disorderly conduct in a restricted capital, and parading. And I've been in parades before, but I've never been in the 71-second parade, so I don't know what that looks like.
Exactly.
So, right, it was, and so Dinesh, to the point of like for me and why my faith is so important, I saw in the moment that the Lord just wrapped His arm around me, because from that night in jail, I started doing the Lord's Prayer. So much that the jailer closed the door leading into the jailhouse. Then she comes back and asks if there's something I want to read. I asked for the Bible. So that night I was literally able to fall asleep with the Bible in my arms. The next day we go to the marshal's office to get to get me processed and all that, to go to my bond hearing. And my lawyer comes in from Florida, red eyes, comes over. I didn't even think he was going to make it. He shows up in our little meeting room. And I'm just like so floored that he made it in time, that when he leaves, I fall on my knees and I start singing this Brandon Lake song, Gratitude. And I just could say on my knees, I throw up my hands and I praise you again and again. As we're getting ready to be transported to the courthouse, I'm the only one still in civilian clothes. And I have this Barnabas shirt that says Jesus Saves on the back. And there's this tall guy, white guy, who's big dude, they're all in their jumpsuit. He's all tatted up. He looked like if you're casting in Oz looking for your white supremacist. Like, this is the guy. And on the back said Jesus saved my shirt. He goes, "Hey man, nice shirt." I go, "Oh yeah? Well, Jesus saved my life." And I just start talking about God, talking about Jesus. He's like, "Oh yeah, I'm reading the Bible too." As we're being transported, there was another guy jumped in. We're just talking about God, talking about like Lord of the Rings and C.S. Lewis, and just talking about novels. It was really awesome. And we get to the courthouse, and there's 5 altogether. As we're walking into the courthouse, I'm the last one to come in. And as I shuffle in, I knew my wife and my lawyer were going to be there. But I look over, and the entire seat all the seats are taken by supporters of mine. Half of them from the church. I go to Godspeed Church. They're there. I'm looking over, and I'm just shook because of the support. The pastor who married us is there. And I'm like, wow, okay, here we go. We get into the back where they hold us before we come out. And as the people are getting ready to go, the guy, the big dude who was in there for 18 years and was trying to get out, but he had just stabbed someone the year before, turns to me and said, "Hey man, can you pray for us?" I'm like, okay. And so I prayed, and I remember finishing off, regardless of if we're released today or we're still held here, we know Jesus will take care of us. So as it went out, everyone went first. I was the last one to go. I get there. As I walk out, shuffling out, handcuffed on my wrists, my waist, and my ankles, like I'm one of those people who were trafficking with guns, who had stabbed somebody recently, who were involved in like high-level assault. I walk out, and everyone in the courthouse that was there to support me, they stand up. And this feeling, Dinesh, like I can't tell you, it was just, man, it still always gets me. It's just to see that true support of like everyone there. And I shuffle over. My wife comes around the corner with her belly out, and she's wearing my ring on her cross necklace that her godmother gave her. Give each other a kiss. She's holding the Bible, and proceeded from then on to my lawyer defended me. The magistrate was even confused at this level, that these crimes were being held at such a standard. She didn't even really know what to do. The DA in LA, he was like, "Oh, yeah, sure, we'll do this." Like he wasn't even really aware of like what to do in the situation, because the law didn't match what they were doing, Wow. So I was able to be released that day. I went home that night. My wife was never alone the entire time we were separated. And I saw the jail and the gates fling open, and all I could do in all those moments was just worship. That's it. That's all I could do. So all it did was really strengthen my resolve for the Lord and know that we're on the right side of history. Right now, we are fighting this, and we were able to get people to support right away, to donate, from Jeremy Boring of Daily Wire to Gina Carano, and so many awesome people. Seth Dillon of the Babylon Bee, and they did a great job of featuring. We did a little feature together, and I was able to raise enough money to get lawyers. My lawyer John Gross and Steve Salzer have been supporting and been fighting my case the entire time. Our case was initially supposed to be heard on October 15th, but by God's grace, it got moved all the way to after the inauguration. So, who knows what can happen there.
Wow.
And right now, yeah, we're still praying that this just, ends. And we're still so fortunate and feel in good spirits because of all the support, prayers, and financial support to help me at least just defend myself against the United States government. And one point I'll say is my mom told me this last year. She said that we come from Liberia, West Africa. And my grandfather, I didn't know this until 2017, but he was the main pastor at the main church in Liberia called Providence Church. He would speak on the pulpit against the administration. They came to him and told him, "You need to shut up." He said no. Then a few weeks later, he's killed in a car accident and the driver walks away unscathed. So my mom actually got to see what happens when her family member stands up against the government, which gave me just a better understanding of how she was seeing me. Part of it breaks my heart, but then also the other part is like, man, it's in my blood. There's almost nothing I can do. Like I have to.
Yeah, you are a character, and boy, you have been through a lot, because I know what it's like to feel that weight of the federal government, and yet the fact that you've been responding with so much grace and strength, I think is a testament to your faith, and I certainly wish you well, and I hope that justice is served in this outrage. Guys, I've been talking to Siaka Massaquoi, actor and activist. Follow him on X at Siaka, Massaquoi. Siaka, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you, Dinesh. Hope to talk soon.
Once again, MyPillow has been canceled by another box store, so Mike Lindell is fighting back. He's passing an incredible offer exclusively to my viewers and listeners. The standard MyPillow retails for $49.98, but for a limited time, Mike is offering it for just $14.98. Wow, don't miss out on this amazing deal while supplies last. Order now using promo code Dinesh, or you can call 800-876-0227. But that's not all. You can get a MyPillow 4-piece towel set, just $25. Brand new mattress topper as low as $69.98. The famous MyPillow bed sheets as low as $25, and so much more. To get the discounts on all the MyPillow products, including the standard size MyPillow, just $14.98, limited, by the way, to 10 per order, go to MyPillow.com, but don't forget to use the promo code. It's DINESH, Dinesh. I expect today to complete my discussion of Booker T. Washington's Up from Slavery. And I want to talk about his trip to Europe, which he does at the summit of his influence and fame. He has been going nonstop, and he's been going nonstop for years. And he's actually quite drained. He's quite exhausted. He said that when he gave a talk in Boston at a theater, and interestingly, at that talk was young W.E.B. Du Bois, who would later become a rather astringent critic of Booker T. Washington. But he's there. Booker T. Washington speaks. Du Bois reads an original sketch from his own writings. So they're both present, but he said that there were a number of people who noticed after the meeting that he was exhausted. And some of the ladies that he knows come up to him and ask him, "Hey, have you ever been to Europe?" And Booker T kind of passes that off and essentially dismisses it. He can't conceive of going to Europe. First of all, he's extremely busy. Second of all, it just all seems so not just foreign, but fantastic to him. But it turns out that this Boston group that supports his work is completely serious. And they tell him that he and his wife need a break. They must go. And not only that, but they have already planned out his whole itinerary. And he's going to be going to Holland. He's going to be going to Belgium, to London. And he has to go, obviously, by steamer. Now, eventually, he resists initially, but then he agrees to go. They've found someone to temporarily take his place at Tuskegee, and he goes to Europe. And he says that it was to him almost like being in a dream. He says, on the other hand, he was very conscious that, going to Europe, he said, for blacks of that era and that generation was so luxurious, was so extravagant, that people might think that he, Booker T. Washington, had somehow become, as he puts it, stuck up, or he was trying to show off. And he said that this worried him, this haunted him. But nevertheless, he was determined to go. And he did go. And what's striking about his account is that everywhere he goes, he is well known even in Europe. You almost see the contrast between Booker T's early life and his life now. He goes on the ship, he meets a senator from New Jersey, and there are people on the ship, including the captain, who come to greet him and congratulate him. He gets to Holland. They give him a tour of how they raise the Holstein cattle. He then goes on to Belgium, and where he visits the battlefield of Waterloo. Then he goes to Paris, and the American ambassador in France stops to make a formal call on him. He says that he goes to a reception in Paris, and who's there? Justice Harlan of the U.S. Supreme Court. Let's remember, Justice Harlan is famous for writing the dissent in the segregation, so-called Plessy versus Ferguson decision. All these people who are now in the history books are popping up right here and right there. And they're asking Booker T. Washington to attend a reception and say a few words and give a speech. So it is kind of funny that he's supposed to be getting rest and he's on vacation, but no, it's not really a vacation, because it becomes, as Debbie likes to call it sometimes when we do this sort of thing, an event. It's an event, and it is for Booker T. And he gives us little excerpts of things he says, and he says that it is a great human law that the future of my race, but he could be speaking of anybody's race, hinges on the question of whether it can make itself of indispensable value to people in the community and the town and the state and the country. He goes in London, the American ambassador, again, this time the U.S. ambassador to England, invites him to a reception. He goes to the reception. Who's at the reception? The writer Mark Twain. So Booker T. Washington is now among the elite. He's talking to the people in England, and they go, oh, before you, who came here several years ago, none other than William Lloyd Garrison, the great abolitionist. And alongside him, or around the same time, Frederick Douglass. So just a parade of luminaries. He's invited to Windsor Castle to have tea with the Queen. And then he makes an interesting point. He goes, it's very hard, he says, to become accustomed to speaking to English audiences. They have him say a few words, and here's what Booker T. Washington says, and Debbie will identify with this. He says, the average Englishman is so serious and is so tremendously in earnest about everything that when I told a story that would have made an American audience roar with laughter, the Englishman simply looked at me straight in the face without even cracking a smile. Debbie's chuckling because when we went to the Michael Jackson concert in London, the Michael Jackson tunes break out. Debbie leaps out of her seat and is basically getting ready to do major Michael Jackson dance moves. And then she's caught by the fact that the entire English audience is sitting there absolutely motionless and polite. Some of them at the most slightly snapping their fingers, but no one doing any kind of dance moves, whatever. So Debbie looks around again, and then meekly sits down. So this is what Booker T. Washington is talking about. But he says that when you get to know the English, they're actually very sweet and very devoted. He says that he was invited to a reception by the Duke and Duchess of Sutherland. He says, I may add that I believe the Duchess of Sutherland is the most beautiful woman in England. And then he says that she asked him, he thought just out of politeness, to write her when he got home. So he and his wife sent her a letter, and he goes, to his great surprise, she wrote back a long letter. They've now been maintaining an ongoing correspondence, and he says they have essentially become pen pals. And so the Booker T. Washington's book closes on this account. He has a kind of brief chapter on last words, but it's nothing more than just a summation of his philosophy. And a single line here will suffice in capturing that philosophy. He says that this country demands that every race, and really every group, shall measure itself by the American standard. What's that standard? Excellence, achievement, merit. What Booker T. Washington is really saying is that when you are being blocked from something, you can claim it as a right. I need to have a right to do this or a right to do that. But the moment that that right is granted you, all excuses need to stop. All explanations about why you can't succeed need to be put to the side. The whole question needs to be how you can succeed. This is not to say that you would be expected to succeed immediately. In fact, if you could succeed immediately, you wouldn't have the need for an institution like the Tuskegee Institute, where you're learning from the ground up very basic things. Booker T. Washington understands that civilization is not something that magically appears. It's not even something that's conferred upon you. It's something that is built and developed and earned. And so this is done on an individual basis, but it's also done as a group. Booker T. Washington is not the kind of individualist who says essentially every black guy just needs to realize that he's an individual or she's an individual, just do it on your own. No, he recognizes that people do function in society. He does recognize that in various ways, we are all part of teams. And that team can be your school that is playing soccer against another school. It is your community. It is in some way your ethnic group. And so Booker T. Washington is not somebody who emphasizes racial consciousness, but he also recognizes that as a result of slavery and segregation, in a way, racial consciousness has been foisted on blacks. It's very difficult for blacks not to see themselves as black because, of course, the whole society does. So he accepts that. And what he says is, let's sort of turn that into a strength, not by going and demanding benefits from the government. Let's help each other. Other groups help each other. We should help each other. But even in helping each other, he never loses sight of the fact that we, meaning the black community, if we want to have a good reputation, let's be of service to our community. Let's be of service to our society. So it is on this hopeful, optimistic note. And think of how interesting it is that you have a black man in 1901 reflecting ideas that are relevant then, but remain, I think, completely relevant now. If the black community could develop leaders, and there are some, ironically, those leaders now tend to be more on the right side of the aisle. These are some of the blacks today who are supporting Trump, who are supporting the idea of upward mobility over government handouts. Booker T. Washington is the leader of this group. Now, Frederick Douglass came a little before him, and articulated in a wonderful manner the abolitionist philosophy. And of course, Douglass remains in some ways my hero. But so is Booker T. Washington, because Booker T. Washington he lived through the very end of slavery. And then he built an impressive institution and an impressive life, a life that unfortunately today is a little bit sidelined, a little bit depreciated, a little bit ignored, but it shouldn't be. And one way that we can discover Booker T. Washington today is through his great book, Up From Slavery.
Subscribe to the Dinesh D'Souza podcast on Apple, Google, and Spotify, or watch on Rumble, YouTube, and SalemNow.com.